Welcome to the best sports betting podcast, where we'll talk about reviews, previews, tips and all things betting related. Brought to you by bestsportsbetting.co.za. Now, on to our hosts.
How's punters? Welcome back to the Best Sports Betting Podcast. And today we're going to be splitting up the podcast into two different segments. The first segment, we're going to be chatting about the CSKA Moscow esports scandal that's taking place. Lots of unhappy Betway and Hollywoodbets customers due to a Betradar pricing error. And in the second segment, we're going to be chatting about some upcoming sports as well as some bets. With me as always is Simon. Simon, how have you been?
I've been very well, Rob. Very pleased that a lot of sports seems to be coming back into the picture, which makes weekends a lot more exciting than they used to be.
Yeah, lots of sports starting and also lots of sports wrapping up, which is also kind of interesting. You know, you've got the Premier League and whatnot starting up again pretty soon, even though it's pretty much just ended. But how was your weekend? Was it a good one?
It was really good, Rob. Really relaxing. We've here in North Carolina, there's been a lot of rain. We have there's almost a thunderstorm. It's kind of like Johannesburg, almost every afternoon. And during the summer, it can be very muggy and very rainy. But I had a good weekend. Thank you.
Well, it was a freezing weekend down here in Cape Town. We had some snow on Table Mountain, and I saw some amazing pictures of guys playing in the snow up on some of the higher mountains in the Cape. But yeah, still pretty cold down here. Got my heater next to me, and let's jump right into the big news. And you wrote an article for BSB about how this has affected some punters, what exactly the situation is. I'm quickly gonna give a brief recap. So basically what happened is there was a couple of esports matches, and the bookmakers, Hollywoodbets and Betway, they receive all of these odds from a site called Betradar. These are the guys who compile the odds. These are all the feeds that you see on the Hollywoodbets site, on Betway site. These odds come from these guys. And what happened is someone put up the wrong odds. Simon will go into a bit more detail what happened. But they put up the wrong odds, and punters basically had hundreds of thousands of rands of winnings cut down to absolutely nothing. I saw screenshots of guys who I think were going to win like 100K. I think they ended up getting a 29 rand payout. So there's a lot of discussion and there's a lot of angry punters at the moment. Simon, what can you tell me about this situation and your thoughts?
It's a little bit of an unfortunate situation, obviously, Rob. These things do happen. I think what's important really is how bookmakers handle these situations when they do happen, because I think inevitably when you're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of data sets and numbers every day, someone's going to make a mistake somewhere along the line. Just to reiterate what you said earlier, it wasn't actually Betway or Hollywoodbets who made this mistake. It was their odds supplier, which is an international company, as you said, called Betradar. So one of their odds compilers there they took a data set and applied it to a different player, which obviously then made their odds incorrect. So in terms of Betway and Hollywoodbets' reaction and response to the problem, I think they did handle the situation fairly well. They reached out on social media. They published a blog apologizing and explaining how their players would be compensated. One thing which they did do, which I think really got the players' backs up and maybe wasn't the best move, is locking the players' accounts. So I don't know if you agree with that, Rob, and maybe, how do you think they could have perhaps handled the situation better? What did they do right? What did they do wrong, in your opinion?
I think the only thing that they've honestly done wrong here is, and even for me to say it's wrong is a bit of a stretch, but I think the communication wasn't that great, especially when it came to locking the accounts. Look, these accounts have been opened, as far as I understand, since, and they were closed for investigation because Betway and Hollywoodbets weren't sure what was going on. Betradar wanted to find out what was going on, and obviously the bookmakers needed to manually reconcile all of these different accounts that had placed bets on these games. And there were a lot of punters affected by this. So, look, the communication on why they closed the accounts could have been better, but other than that, I can't say they've done much wrong. This all falls under palpable error, which basically says if there's an incorrect odd or odds on the site and you bet on it and it turns out that the odds were wrong, then the bet will either be voided or correctly settled at what the correct odds should be. So it is a difficult situation for punters and for the bookmakers.
I couldn't agree with you more, Rob. I think punters must realize that when they do sign up for accounts, and this is going to go across the board. I mean, I've yet to come across a betting site which doesn't have what they call generally the palpable error rule, which, as you correctly said, if any obvious error, that's basically what palpable means. It means obvious errors made in pricing odds. Any bets made on that market are voided and the stakes are refunded. So, Betway and Hollywoodbets did act completely within their rights. Closing accounts, unfortunately, is just something that they do it's to limit the further damage. So obviously when you're trying to investigate something like this, the last thing you want is more people placing bets, making more of a mess, and basically just taking a problem which could perhaps be quite small if you locked accounts quick enough and kind of solve it faster by mitigating the damage. So I can understand that really gets players' backs up because they kind of feel very helpless in that situation, and I think that's what kind of what sets a lot of people off in these situations. But I must be honest, I can't really see anything. From my perspective, I think that both the bookmakers did the right thing in the circumstance.
Yeah, and look, guys are very upset, and if you go have a look on Twitter on the Hollywoodbets and Betway timeline, there's hundreds of different posts, and I'm sure you've seen some all over Facebook. And these guys are saying that they need compensation. They require compensation for the money that they would have had. But it's not exactly how things work. You don't get compensated for an incorrect price. That's like me walking into Pick and Pay and seeing, hey, there's a nice bottle of whiskey that's that they're charging $50 for, and I know it's probably R1,000 bottle of whiskey, and I take it to the cashier, and the cashier's like, sorry, the scans is R1,000. There's been an error somewhere. They're not going to give me that bottle of whiskey for $50. I know it's maybe not the greatest example, but it just doesn't work like that. Bookmakers have palpable error in all of, as you mentioned, in all of the betting terms. And when you log into the site, for example, on Hollywoodbets, there's literally a box that you click that says, I agree to the terms and conditions. And you have to do this every time you log in. So you're agreeing to these terms and conditions every time you're logging in. And I think you're also agreeing to these terms once you actually place a bet. So I can understand the frustration from the guys, but going to the gambling board, sure, you can try that. The gambling board's going to come back and say palpable error. The bookmakers are going to say palpable error. But what I found interesting was the fact that the bookmakers actually paid these bets out rather than just void them completely, which is what I would have done, in all honesty, if there was such a glaring price error on a soccer match. So,
Rob, from what I understood, some bets were voided and some of them were paid out. Is that correct? Because in the blog that Hollywoodbets published, they said that they would that at least that Betradar suggested that they settle the bets on that
price.
Team, on that CSKA Moscow, or at a mid-tier team. So in fact, not even at the correct price, at a better price.
Yes.
So at somewhere between what the price should have been and what the price was posted as, which I think is, that's where I think the compensation comes in, because not only if they did this, and as I said, I'm not 100% sure, but if they paid out players at bigger odds than they should have been, but not quite as big as what was posted, I think that is compensation, because you actually kind of,
you're getting more than you should get, to be honest.
You're getting more than you should get, exactly. So to me, that is compensation. I'm not, if that has happened across the board with Hollywoodbets and Betway, I think that's a very sincere and generous move on the bookmakers' part.
Yeah, and I think another thing that has brought this problem into kind of prominence is the code sharing. So Betway, for example, have code sharing, whereas if I put a R1 bet on 20 different matches and it's paying out 100,000 Rand, once I've placed that bet, I get a code, and I can share that code with all my friends. And all they literally need to do is just click on that code, and it'll be loaded into the bet slip, and they can just place the bet. And I think that's also contributed to this problem with, I think it was, what was his name? Wiseman or something like that, who had a 1 Rand to a 600,000 Rand bet, and that guy shared his code, and it was bet by hundreds of other punters who then had their, I don't want to say their winnings taken away, because that would be wrong, but had their accounts affected by it. So it's an interesting problem, and you and myself dealt with this back in the day, years back at Betway. There were lots of palpable errors coming through. It was almost something that we would deal with on a daily basis.
Absolutely, Rob. I think palpable errors and the question of the market, who wins the rest of the match, were probably our biggest problem queries every single day. But you're absolutely right. These pulps do happen, and as I said, when it's going to happen. It's going to happen regularly when you're dealing with so many numbers like this and data sets. There's going to be mistakes, and you got to think of it. I think as a punter, it's you can actually get often free bets and so on for pointing these errors out instead of taking advantage of them and basically trying to steal from the bookmaker. Essentially, you're going to get caught out. Rather just make the error known to the bookmaker and avoid all the trouble of getting your account locked and being penalized for basically trying to steal, essentially, if we're honest, from a bookmaker. Yes. It's not a wise move.
And also what's happened here is because it was basically one player or one team that had their odds incorrectly compiled, and this team went to play on, I think it was another 10 or don't quote me on the exact figure, but a whole bunch of other matches, and guys were obviously, hey, I made a whole lot of money fading this guy in the last game. I'm just going to double up because this guy is terrible. That kind of thing, or this guy's amazing. Yeah. So guys run up pretty big balances, and I'm sure there's a whole lot of bets rather than just one or two that have been affected. But it is a sad situation, and look, it's hard to pick a side here, but I'm going to have to go with the bookie side. They covered in their terms and conditions. I feel like they've done a lot. They've taken the issue very seriously. They haven't tried to brush it under the rug. They are engaging with punters. And look, hopefully this is all going to die down in a week or two, but there's definitely going to be some damage control done by both of the brands.
Well, that's what's another thing, Rob. I think that if we have to point a finger at the bookmakers, I think one mistake again, perhaps locking the accounts isn't always a good move, but the other one is the error did happen across matches on Friday and Saturday. So in an ideal world, a mistake like this would get picked up a little earlier, which would then obviously not allow the chaos to ensue across 10 matches. I think it was like 3 or 4 on Friday and 5 or 6 on Saturday. So the error did take a long time to get picked up, which I think is perhaps a little sloppy on behalf of Betradar again. But that's
on Betradar's side, I think it's a little sloppy. Just looking at the times when these matches were played, the matches started on the 28th. At 8 o'clock at night, 20 past 8, and the last one was the next day at 4 o'clock in the morning, I think it was. So, all of these bets were taken, most of them, were during this period. So, you can understand why this might have slipped through. It's basically, I want to say, 8 hours where the odds were wrong on a single thing. So, it is a very complicated situation, but hopefully some punters who've gone to the board can let us know what's happening in the comments below. I'd love to find out what some of the extra steps are that punters are taking. My advice is just to leave it, to be honest. Going to the board, as I said earlier, is just going to get you. It's going to get you a reply a couple months later, and they're going to say, "Sorry, palpable error, bookmakers covered." But I think we're gonna wrap that up. Unless you have anything further to say on the subject.
No, I don't think so, Rob. I think we covered it all. As I said, I think it's really important that punters read the rules when they bet. I think that it's your responsibility as a punter to do that. Bookmakers do make mistakes. They obviously try and cover themselves for them, and bookmakers don't try to steal for you on the whole. There are always exceptions. Some bad things happen in the industry, but just try and play by the rules, and you'll be looked after, generally speaking.
Yeah, and they're not going to try and rob thousands and thousands of users or punters at once. I mean, that's just asking for trouble. So yeah, guys, just as Simon said, read your betting rules. Make sure you know what's going on, and you can avoid this happening to you. If it does happen and you get your account locked, just sit it out. Wait a couple of days, bet on another account somewhere else. Your account will be returned to you pretty quickly, unless there's some suspicious activity going on that is related to fraud and whatnot. But yeah, enough about that. We're going to move on to the second part of our podcast now.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to visit our site, Facebook and Twitter pages. Let's go make some money.